Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next episode of our career YouTube channel where we talk about all things career. I have with us today Pablo Pinto. He's just awesome person that's doing a lot of really cool things. He has moved from having a job to being a founder, an entrepreneur, and back. So just happy to have him talk about that journey with us today. Welcome, Pablo. Why don't you give us a brief background of what you're working on and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Glenn, really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship and careers. These are topics that I've enjoyed, building upon. And yes, we'd love to share. And I'll start by, by sharing what I'm doing now. And then we'll tell you a little bit more about my background and how I got here. I'm currently the founder at Solved. Solved is a knowledge marketplace where iconic operators from different parts of the ecosystem, usually tech startups, and tech companies are helping uh, founders, business owners, entrepreneurs with some of the most important motions that they need for their business to get going, either starting out or growing or even getting acquired. Um, the journey of how I got here, very quickly, I'll walk you through how I tell my story about my career. I usually tell my career story in sets of 5 years. The first of those 5 years, I call them the grit years. At the time, I was living in New York. I started out as a founder. That was the first thing I did, and I call them the grit years because this is the time that as a founder you just have to figure out how the world works. I just came out of college and I had to really wear different hats and make it happen. Um, 5 years later, we were able to sell the company, which was a really good opportunity for me to really think of what I wanted to do next. And I embarked on the next set of 5 years, which I call the enlightenment years. And those were the years where I intentionally looked for experiences where I could learn from people who had done something similar to what I've done, but at a larger scale. So I went on during those 5 years. I was employee number three, number five, and number 10 in that order, in startups that came out of MIT and NYC in California. So it was again an intentional ride to really learn from the best founders that I could find, and also learn to become more technical. I had started my career functionally doing multiple things on the commercial side, partnership side, marketing side, but I was really curious to know how much I could learn about software and building technology. So I I went through through that period, and then in 2021, or 2020 really, like I also felt inspired when Mark Andreessen penned his essay about saying that it's time to build, and he was referring to a lot of the infrastructure and things that we were missing in the U.S. to mitigate COVID. I also felt compelled to, hey, it's time to build. I have built a foundational career as being a founder, then as learning from great founders, and then I thought, okay, this is my time to build. And so I broke into product management. I joined a couple of other companies, talent marketplaces specifically, with the intention to start building. I worked at one of those companies in 2021. It's called On Deck. On Deck was building communities, online communities across the world, really, in different angles, helping founders, helping job seekers. I helped build some of the talent function and the talent marketplace for that community. Um, Afterwards, my last job, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about, how I got those jobs, but um, it's another marketplace where I helped build a lot of the infrastructure behind it. So learning a little bit of no code and understanding how software works has been really important in my career as well. And now I'm here building again as a founder. So it's I'm still in these building years. I have not left them yet, and we'll see what happens in the next few.
Yeah. So let's think about it a bit. How have you found being an entrepreneur assisted you or helped you in the corporate world working and vice versa?
Yeah. So most of the companies that I've worked in have been on the smaller side. I do have also an experience working with a company that was over 200 people. And I wouldn't call that corporate, but I would definitely call it a slower company in that sense. When you're working in the startup world, you're always fighting against time. So the things that you learn as a startup, either founder or early stage employee, is to be really fast, and you're indexing on learning and innovation. So there's a lot of I would say like a couple of the skills that I find important and crucial in the startup world are the sense of urgency and ownership of the work. And so you are sometimes hired for a specific thing, and you're given a job description, but you end up doing a lot more than just that because there aren't enough hands, and you're running out of time and out of money. You have to make it work. So if you think about, when you go from startup to something bigger or larger or more corporate, which tends to be slower and more bureaucratic, if you come in as that person who's very fast and has a lot of ownership and urgency, you very easily and quickly stand out. And so that is usually what I've seen, either from my experience, but also from other people sharing. It's that speed of work that it really makes a difference. And on the reverse dynamic, some of the things that I think we take for granted in the startup world, like sales or negotiation or partnerships, those things in the startup world, we see them as crucial for the survival of the company. But those same skills you learn in the corporate world because you need to partner. You need to sell your innovation or your whatever you're working on to your manager. The manager needs to approve it, and they need to sell it to the person above them. So you learn a lot about partnering, looking for team impact and not just individual impact. So those are things that in a corporate setting, they're crucial to your job and your survival as an employee. And then when you bring that to the startup world, it turns out that these are things that are going to make your startup and your job a lot easier because now you've brought this experience of being a good negotiator, being able to talk to people and get what you want by looking at some of the different stakeholders that you have to talk with and convince.
Let's dive a little bit deeper because I know some of my audience are probably going to ask questions like, "What does it mean by?" Let's talk about that. What does it mean by ownership? Give me some examples of what that would potentially look like in that world where you're working in the corporate world. What you learned that.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe an example is probably easiest. While we were on deck, we had this internal like cultural ethos, which was if you see something, say something and do something. Because I think we all are familiar with the if you see something, say something. Big campaign in New York. Um, you know, and with on deck, we took that and we said, hey, but do something. So it's not just enough for you to say, hey, something's happening. Uh, and what we actually want is to actually say it, right? Say it, but also if it's within your skills to do something about it, that's even better, right? Because if you think about that from in the startup world where resources are limited, if you find that you can actually fix a bug or you can talk to a customer, then do it, right? Like just say that, mention the problem, tell how you're going to solve the problem, and then go solve it if you can. And then in the corporate environment, usually this is like very important for the employee manager relationship because when you don't want to be the type of employee that just brings problems, right? Like you usually want to be the type of employee who brings solutions. So likewise, if you notice something is not working well in a company setting, in a larger setting, you can also bring a potential solution, right? And you can also say to the manager, I'm thinking about solving this issue this way. Like, what do you think? So that also helps the manager understand, okay, here I have someone that I can trust and I can partner with. And then it's, obviously slowly as you build the trust and as they build trust in your judgment, you're going to be allowed to do more in that larger setting.
I remember listening to this, and I remember I think it's a YouTube thing where Mark Cuban was talking about a situation where he saw a problem at work and he decided to fix the problem. And then when he went to his boss with a solution, the boss looked at him and said, "Why you did that? That's my job. Do you want my job?" And that was a motivation for him to just like, "I'm not working the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out of this. I need to be able to learn and grow and excel." How do you explain that to somebody that's having their job? Because there's this hierarchy in the world, and some people are afraid of people who are, the Mark Cuban of the world who basically see a problem and want to fix it, a Pablo of the world who see a problem and don't fix it. They're intimidated by that because they feel like you're going for a job How do you explain to someone who's there to take those initiative but be mindful of that?
Yeah, it's a great well, one of the things that as I worked more in the technology world the last 5 years, one of the things that one of my managers said to me was the coding and programming is not the hard thing. The hard thing is the humans and the people around it. And I took that to heart because the same example that you're mentioning is, I would say, you need to think carefully and tread carefully with how you provide these answers or these solutions to your manager. Um, if you if you end up doing something without the manager knowing and the manager finding out later, then you can create this tension between, hey, I'm the manager, I was supposed to be implementing that solution, but you did it for me. What's going on? So you have to start by understanding also the worldview of your manager, right? If you think it's their job to do it, then your job as the person reporting to them is being helpful in providing the work and in giving them the opportunity to do it themselves. And then you would have to just to give some time and understand what kind of manager you have, because a great manager will open themselves up and will give you the red carpet so that you can implement and you can shine against the rest of in the company. Great managers are not afraid of that. If you have a manager like in the Mark Cuban example, what's going to happen is people are going to get frustrated and people are going to look for a different place. And so it's very important for you as an employee to understand what kind of manager you have. Do you have a manager who's going to be jealous and is going to block you and is going to prevent you from growing, or do you have a manager who's open to your ideas and who's going to help you shine and even get through, and a lot of times even take more responsibilities and perhaps even having to let you go to another part of the company because you're actually providing a lot more impact.
Valid point. Valid point. Thanks for that. I want to take a step back to you going to work for one of these companies, and let's just like put it out there. On Deck is a place that I really like. I was fortunate enough to get invited to participate as a on the I would say apprentice angel side. We have this angel on deck, and I really enjoyed the
Mm-hmm.
community a lot. It was wonderful to see. Talk about those environment, basically in the sense that there's this wonderful, rich community of just people learning and sharing ideas. How does someone go about preparing for the interview for a job like that? Basically, what are some strategies that you're putting in place to say, okay, how do I get this interview, and how do I do well in the interview in a space where people are just like learning continuously?
Yeah. The So yeah, and I agree. Ondig was and is still a very special place. I was there for a year and a half, and the amount of or the talent density was pretty incredible. I always told the recruiter, Julia, how amazing, how an amazing job she did, because she was able to find very similar people with this same ethos of, like I said earlier, urgency, ownership. And so when I think about how people joined, and even how, like, I remember hiring, I got hired, but then I hired a few people under my team. Um, I would say that the single most important factor, or the single thing that connected all of the people there, all the employees, uh, was this ethos of giving, right, paying it forward, and building for ecosystem impact. So there was no one at On Deck that I can remember ever saying something along the lines of, this is not my job, or talk to someone else, or I'm not going to do this. It was actually the opposite. It was everybody thought, or everybody believed that, in this case, you were mentioning the On Deck angel investment community, right? Like you're building for a specific audience. So it's people who are trying to become angel investors, learn more about that craft. I was in a different part of the company where we're actually helping people get jobs at startups. So I'm giving them some of the tools they needed for job interviews to prepare to find the jobs. But we were all helping the ecosystem, and our ecosystem was the tech world, right? For a long time, our vision was to increase the startup GDP, and so you do that by helping founders, helping people get jobs in the startups, by help get investors together in the community where they would be the ones hopefully financing some of this ventures. And so it's this concept of wanting to make ecosystem impact that for that specific company worked. But if you extrapolate to a lot of the other communities that you see today, I would say this is the same, it's the same DNA that keeps communities and people building those communities together, is that ability and willingness to do something that it's just beyond impact of your job, but actually impact at the ecosystem level.
Let's go back a bit. So you were right there helping people find jobs in startups.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been teaching for a number of years, and a lot of students ask me the questions: How do I get a job with a startup? Give them 5 steps of how they would, one, apply to on deck, and two, prepare for the interview at on deck in a way that you would say, "Wow, this is the person I want to hire."
Yeah, let's. I like that. Let's go through the exercise. And we'll see how many steps we get. But I
Right.
would say it. Yeah, in general. Um, so the way I see and the way I coach people to look at the job process is thinking about a game. Think about a video game. When you're when you start a video game, you're the first thing you should not think about is winning the game. You should first think about winning the first world or the first stage of that, and then unlocking the next game, and then unlocking the next one. Right. So it's like a series of steps that you have to take to then finally get to a place where you could actually now get the job in this case, right? And it all starts um, with understanding, right, what are the right roles in the right companies. Like that would be the first step, right? Like understand functionally, what have you been doing in the past? Are these functions that you want to continue doing? Or think about companies. Like if you're more motivated by the company and by an industry, then perhaps you're flexible on the function, but you have a list of companies that you really would like to work in. So that's the first step, identifying whether it's the function or whether it's the company and the mission that really excites you. So when you do that, then you finally have a potential list, and you can start looking, because it's overwhelming to go on LinkedIn and click on jobs and then see thousands of jobs and then hundreds of applicants. And so you don't want to get beaten by in this first stage of the game, right? Um, you win that first stage of the game by inwardly looking and understanding what you want next for your career. So say you get there, you unlock the next step. What is the next step? Is start to establish communication with those companies that you want to apply, right? In some cases, it's directly applying. So that would be like step number two. You're the direct, you apply to a job on a company's website. But more importantly, you start making and building relationships. So you start sending out messages to either the hiring manager, to the founders. When it's smaller companies, I would recommend reaching out to the founders. In larger companies, a lot of the job descriptions tell you who is the hiring manager. It will tell you this role reports to the VP of sales. You go to LinkedIn, you find the VP of sales, and you say, "Hey, I applied to this job." So you start building these relationships, and building a network, like we were saying earlier, is very important in anything, but specifically here in the job application process, it's very important to build those relationships. So you start building out this network. You start sending out messages. That's step number two. And then to win that stage, right, you need to hear back, right? You need to hear back to get invited to a first call, or you need to get invited to send an email to X or Y person that you got referred to. So you win that game by when you start hearing back from the audience that you're interested in talking to. Then you actually start now you have actually began the process. So these were two processes or two steps that were like a little bit before the actual process begins. Usually the job process begins by talking to someone on the team. That first call can be a recruiter. Sometimes if it's a very small company, like I said, it can be the founder. And these are most likely what I call the recruiter screens. These are 20 to 30-minute calls or quicker. And what I would say, for starting on that point, right, the step number 3 of talking or doing this first interview and going forward in the process, the biggest thing you need to think about is how do you need to understand the worldview of that person, right? How is the recruiter being being graded, or how are they measuring success of the recruiter? If you think about it, what a recruiter wants and what they look at all day they're making calls, they're reviewing resumes, they're checking boxes, and they're marking people, out of the application funnel. So all they do is they do high volume, and they're not compensated, and they're not really rewarded for finding the needle in the haystack. They're compensated for not making a mistake in pattern matching. They need to find, if they have 2 or 3 people in their head of who they think the right person is, then they need to find 100 of those people and get them through the line. And so understanding what their worldview is and how they see, success is important, because when you present yourself during that call, and we can go, obviously deeper into each one of these steps, it's super important to understand who you're talking to. And then I would say at this point, that was step number 3. The rest of the steps are, I would say, closer to what you would see in a job application process. So, think about maybe a second hiring manager interview, or a case study, a panel presentation, all that plays part of this process. I don't know if is it helpful to go deeper into these pieces?
Dive a little bit deeper into that last one, basically, because that's key. I like the way you break down the steps in terms of it, but when they get to those type of interviews, how are they thinking about them? How are they preparing for those? Like you just mentioned, like probably 3 different panel discussion case studies.
Yeah.
How should they prepare for those?
Yeah. Perfect. And I've actually designed many of these processes myself, so I've been on both sides of the dynamic. So when I was saying on the recruiter screen step, you want to kind of fit the mold, right? You don't want to be the odd person out, because that's not what they're looking for at that point. So you go through the funnel because you match the mold, you're in the pipeline, you're in the application process. What's next? Typically, you would get invited. In tech startups, it is very common to get invited to do a case study. So a case study usually it could be like, a one pager where they explain a little bit of context. It's a problem that the team wants you for you to solve, and it's a process that usually is async. So they give you some instructions, and then they have you solve a problem. They give you some context, and then they give you some time, like usually 2 or 3 days, for you to complete it and then send it back. And so what you want to be thinking there is, at this point is actually when you need to think about how to differentiate yourself from the other 50 people that are in the same stage, or 30 people. And so this is the time where you really need to shine, when it comes to, thinking about the role, and thinking that you have the role. And one of the things that most people don't do is, and you should be doing, is asking questions. As soon as you get an assignment, the very first thing you need to do is you need to understand all the assumptions that they've given you. You need to, obviously at this point, you should know and understand what the business model is doing, what are the problems and the challenges. So you want to have all that clear before you even start. And it's very, welcome. I love it when I hear one of the applicants emailing back to me and saying, is this assumption correct? Or did I understand this correctly? Are there any more assumptions? Are there any more constraints? All of that is a good sign that you are thinking about the right things before you actually try to solve the problem. So do that if you don't have clarity. And then you're going to go and build, the case study, the solutions. You send that back to the team, and most of the times, provided that you're doing a good job at the case study, you get invited to a panel presentation. Those are very fun. I think it puts a lot of people in a nervous position when you're the person seeking out or looking for the job, because you're imagine this. It's like you don't really know much, you've done your exercise, but you don't know what's coming at you. And then you have a few people in the panel. Sometimes it's the hiring manager and the founder, somebody else from a different team. So maybe it could be somebody like a recruiter also there to check for some of the cultural, insights that you may show. And so the panel itself is also a good opportunity for you to differentiate yourself. And what people are looking in these panels, by the way, they're not looking for the right answer. No company designs a case study process for to get free data or to solve their problem for real. they want to test how you think. So they want to test how you think about assumptions. They want to think about how you present things, right? In some cases, they ask you to present things. And if you think about it, if this panel presentation lasts 30 minutes and you bring a deck of 25 slides, you're never going to make it to 25 slides. So like that's already a bad sign. Like you didn't think about time management correctly. So you have to think about time management. You need to think about assumptions. You need to think about how do you justify the answers. And even if it's the wrong answer, it doesn't matter. You need to show your work. You need to justify it by the constraints and the assumptions that you've used for that answer. And so that is really what people are looking for in that stage. It's very fun. Like I said, it's very nerve-wracking maybe the first couple that you do, but at some point you get used to them. And it's a great opportunity for you to feel that you have the job and act like if you had the job, what would you be doing for that company? Like that's really what you need to think there.
Thank you for that. That's pretty insightful. Thank you so much. So so Steve Jobs has this quote where he's saying the secret of success is, having passion in what you're doing and what you want to do. How did you go about knowing that, like you keep going back to being a founder? How did you know that, okay, being a founder is, the basic passion that you want to do? I was listening to a podcast. I forgot his last name, but really powerful guy. His first name is Alex, and he was on Stephen Bartlett podcast, and he was talking about, I can't remember his last name. I apologize, but he was talking about, so he came with a school and he had a consulting job, and then when he started thinking about MBA, he just couldn't answer the question about what is it that he wanted, because he always wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted to go to be an entrepreneur. So basically, he decided, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to be an entrepreneur. Forget MBA school, forget all this. And he went and he drove across the country and became an entrepreneur. How does that passion come about? How does that, and he doesn't want to use the word passion. He's talking about, this thing, this pain point that you think about, that I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a founder. There's something that I want to solve. How do you get to that point? How do you look at someone who's been working, all your life, family member tell them that, no, you need to find a 9 to 5 job, to the point where now they're thinking, no, entrepreneurship is a path to career. How do you explain that to people, that entrepreneurship can be a path, a career path that you enjoy? And how do you find that passion, so to speak?
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of Steve Jobs, by the way. And when I think about the passion word in general, I always like to add, and there's like three, like if you think about a Venn diagram, and being passionate about something is very important, but so are two more things in that Venn diagram. The other, like the second circle would be, what are you good at? And the third circle is does the world need this, and are you going to get paid for it? Because having a passion for something, yes, it is important and it is the biggest driver. Like having a passion for something is the difference between waking up in the morning and being excited about something, and waking up dragging your feet, like having to commute and like just having a bad day, right? So no doubt that passion is like this fuel that you must have inside. But it's important to also think about these other two components, right? Like what are you good at, and does the world need this, and would they want to pay for it? Because I think that in general, entrepreneurship is, for I think historically has been, I would say, at least for my generation, we grew up in a world where we saw our parents having the safety net of jobs, high paying jobs, and we went to schools. You go to college and you don't go to entrepreneurship college. You go to college to earn a degree that usually will help you get a job. Usually the job of university is to help you get a job. And so if you think about those incentives, universities don't necessarily want to help you get a job or want to help you become an entrepreneur, and you have to slowly find it. And at least I'll speak for myself, but my journey has been finding it by, or being an entrepreneur almost out of necessity, because you start somewhere, and then the Mark Cuban example that you gave, right? Like you start working with someone and you start seeing some of this dynamics in companies that you don't necessarily like or understand. You start seeing yourself being blocked and your growth being blocked by someone or an institution. And so you start looking at different things that you can do. And then if you find, if you find that there's something in the world that you want to do that is that the middle of that Venn diagram, then it's going to make it easier for you to like take that leap and become a founder and become an entrepreneur. Because a lot of people have the fear, and I would say rightfully so, that when you're starting out uh, in your career, you have a job, you have a high paying job. It's very different than starting as an entrepreneur and like having to pay people. Like you don't have any money, right? Like it's a very different like path to life, really. So it's really a life choice. And so, like I said, in my case, it was really more about finding out that I I was I was passionate about creating value and creating things that really didn't exist in the market. And that meant that I had to become a founder, that I had to be the one building that because nobody had built it, right? Um, even when I was an employee at smaller companies, and the reason why I've stayed closer to smaller companies is because I get to be, if I cannot be the founder, the second best option for me has always been being really close to the founder and working with the founder. Because if I believe in their mission, then it's almost like my mission too. And so then I help build that mission for them. And so it's a combination of wanting to create value when there was nothing there. That's a one way to find that you really want to be an entrepreneur and being innovative. And the other thing too, I would say, is the the ability to make impact quickly is another thing that you see in entrepreneurs, because in bigger companies you have to go through multiple layers of red tape, approvals, and if you want to get something out the door and something out to the world, it takes time. Whereas in a company, you can literally build a company in a day right now. Like if you have the right skill set and the right mindset and the right passion, you build a company in a day and you start building that. So it is also, I think it's getting easier for people to become entrepreneurs today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I think about, and I try to explain to some of the students or some people who reach out to me through the work that I do on the career side, is primarily just think of the things that you're doing, like you just said, right? You work in a team. Most of the time, you're working with really great people, so you're learning. You're learning problem solving skills. You're learning critical thinking skills, and a lot of these things like you just said, communication skills, and a lot of these skills that you're learning are really unique, but they're engaging for corporate world as well. Like you said, right? Just the thing that you're a self starter. You don't need someone to tell you to do something. You see something that you need to done. So I try to broaden it a little bit to a lot of these people to think of the entrepreneurial skill set that you gain basically from being an entrepreneur or working with a close founder, a close entrepreneur, a small team, because you learn those things
Mm-hmm.
that can bring. So I'm happy that you're saying those
Yep.
things. Um, this sounds like a lot of fun and it's great and you're learning, but for you and from your vantage point, what are some of the lessons learned that you would probably say, I wouldn't do this again, or I've learned from this and gotten better?
From the perspective of yeah, just in general in my career, or maybe just
Yeah,
on the
just
entrepreneur.
general in your
Yeah.
career.
Um, yeah. So I would say maybe let me talk about a couple of lessons first, and maybe then I'll talk about something that I would do differently. But the first lesson that I think in many ways validated my own initial gut or hunch was that you need to build relationships. I moved from, so going back to my career story, I had a company when I was living in New York. This company was a remote company in out of Latin America, and I was living in New York, and I had most of my friends in New York were lawyers, people in finance. Uh, there was really no tech community for me. I had no network, and then I moved to Boston for a year, and then I moved to San Jose in California a little bit later for a couple of years. And I remember how many events I attended, how many people I added on my LinkedIn, how many people I just presented myself to and said, "Hey, I'm Pablo. I'm building this with this company." And oftentimes it was actually building upon the brand that I was working with, right? Like I was attached to a company that became now my personal brand. And in the case of, let's say, the YC company that I worked at, YC opens a lot of doors. If you say that you're working at a YC company, a lot of people will say, okay, great, like let's have a coffee. And so it's using those things that you can see are, your strengths in terms of personal brand, and doubling down on that, and then building a relationship. So I built, and I went from having, I forget, like maybe less than I remember there was a time in my career, early in my career, when I was thinking, oh, it looks kind of ugly to have like a number on my LinkedIn instead of having 500 plus. Because if you look at LinkedIn connections, it's always, whenever you get 500, then it just says 500 plus. But from 0 to 500, it says the number. And so I was like, okay, that doesn't look great. I want to have more than 500. And so I went on, throughout these years, I've been building my relationships and my network and my community. And that has been really important, because these are the people that, and I would say 80% of the times on building this network, it was me trying to help others. It was me providing myself and giving my time to them. And that's how you really get to build this relationship. So building that is very important in today's world. And something adjacent to that, but I do think it's like a different thing on its own. It's community. We talked about On Deck, and we talked about how easy it was and I can give an example. While I was at On Deck as a fellow, before I actually joined On Deck as an employee, when I was a fellow, I was interviewing for a head of product role, and I was going to get interviewed by the head of design of this company, and I had never interviewed. Had never gotten interviewed by a designer. I've hired designers before, but it was the first time, and this person had a big resume, and they had built a lot of things. And my first reaction was like, okay, let me talk to head of design people, understand how they think, how they vet, how they interview, so that I can better prepare my interview. And I remember reaching out to 10 people in the community whose title was head of design or VP of design. I reached out to them. In less than 2 days, I heard back from 5. I ended up talking to 2 people. And within a week, I was able to talk to 3 amazing heads of design who gave me a lot of insight, and they helped me understand how I should prepare for that interview. So reaching out to a network of individuals who are willing, we talked about it before, right? Who are willing to give without asking anything in return has also been a huge leverage and a huge way for me to build my career. So if there are any communities out there, I highly recommend people joining them. It could be of either functional base, right? Like all marketers, all product managers, or it could also be people who are going from being entrepreneurs to getting a job in the corporate world, or consultants looking to network so they can get a job in the startup. Finding a community and being part of a community really, really increases the chances of you're getting to your goals. So these I would say are in terms of learnings, but I also always think about like the what is like the one thing that I would have done differently. It's very specific to my career in product. And the story is like when my company got acquired, I knew that I wanted to become a product manager, and but I again, like if you think about the unlocking certain stages, I couldn't go from like exit a founder in a foreign market to product manager at a YC company. It was like it's too much of a gap, and so I had to build these steps, right? So get a first job, network, build the relationships, understand what product is, up level on my product skills, and then it finally broke into product. And it took me 3.5 years. And the biggest thing that held me back, because I obviously think I could have done it faster, the biggest thing that held me back was the thought that I kept thinking that I needed to be very technical. I thought I had to be really technical to be a product manager, because I wanted to defend myself against, these engineers that I'm going to be working with. Little did I know, I finally broke into product, got the job. Nobody really cared, really, that I was technical or non-technical. So in a way, it was like, oh my God, I spent all this time trying to become technical, and really, it wasn't really that necessary. It's a very good nice to have, and it makes you stronger, but not required. So to extrapolate to other people, I would say the advice here is map out the must-haves and the nice-to-haves in whatever career transition you are, in whatever job you're applying to, and lean on your strengths and use that, right? Instead of trying to cover all your weaknesses, lean on your strengths And I know that pivots and jobs and everything that you're looking for will happen faster.
That's actually a really great advice. I remember listening to I really enjoy listening to Stephen Bartlett podcast. It's just one of those things you learn a lot from. Sometimes I wish school could just onboard some of these things nowadays. I look back at it that school just should use some of these podcasts to teach us. But anyway, and he was talking to the founder of Gymshark, basically, and the founder said something just like what you're saying, right? When he was basically he's a founder, he couldn't take on the CEO role. He knew that he had a lot to, so he brought in a CEO, and then he examined what was his weaknesses and what was his strengths. And like he said, he took time to work on improving the strengths. And then when he got to the point where it was necessary for him to build the weaknesses, then he went out and found people to help him. So those are
Yes.
that's a very good point that you're making. So just to reiterate that. And it's funny because you saying this and I hear that you kind of realize that there's a lot of similarities between really really good employees and really really good founders. You kind of see that a lot, basically, where they go through that trajectory the same way, and that's why they can go over and be founders and then go back and be really great, basically CEOs and founders. So it's just the learning process, as you said, and just understanding what those are, the must have and the nice to have. So really great point. Um, so I also
Yeah.
noticed that on LinkedIn that you are doing some angel investing, and that's a unique thing. So, and a little bit off the topic of the career path, but it's also something that you can. Why did you decide to do that? Like, give us some, like a little bit. Why did you decide to do angel investing, and how do you find it aligned with your career path and all the things that you're doing?
Yeah. And I've only done three investments as an angel investor, and it'll probably obviously continue to grow. But it really comes down to, like I was saying earlier, if I'm the founder, that's like the best spot for me to be. That's where I thrive and what I enjoy the most. But if I can't be the founder and I want to be very close to founders, I want to be almost like a founder whisperer of sorts. And I want to help, and I get involved in helping people. And I can't tell you how many founders I've spoken to in my life, like, maybe even a couple hundreds. And there are times where, you're talking to these founders because they're asking for, specific help here and there. And then you learn about their company. So you get excited about the company. And, and I would say, like, don't take my advice as like investment advice, because most people tell you if you want to be an investor, you need to be rational, have some sort of thesis. Um, and in my case, it's actually been, I don't think about those things. I think about the person who's doing this. Like, I think about the company they're creating, and it's really about betting on the founder and having an opportunity to help that founder. So the investments that I've done have been uh, in the marketplace space. One is kind of odd because it's in the supply chain world, which I don't know a lot about, but I know the founder, and that founder actually acquired my company way back in the day. So I know how capable he is, and I know how much they could benefit from having me around to sort of complement their technical and domain expertise. So it's really about, yeah, it's about finding a way to amplify my knowledge and my impact. It's actually very close or related to like what I'm doing now as a founder at Solved, because it's really about helping, right? And for a lot of people, writing that first check is very helpful, but it's more helpful to be the person providing connections, providing knowledge as well.
Ah, yeah. I think of it the same way. I've made a few myself, and fundamentally, that's how I think about it. The same way you're thinking about it is now. I don't really have an investment thesis or thing. I just see great founders, and I just want to support them and
Good,
help them. So I just like, okay,
good,
yeah. So you're right. I probably
good to hear I'm not alone. Yeah,
right. Yeah, no. So basically, leave us with a book, a podcast, a YouTube channel that you think we should watch to really get this insight into how, what, somebody really great that you just love. I just mentioned that I really like listening to Steve Barley because he brings people I'm
yeah.
learning from. You give us a book or one of those, a movie, podcast that you would say, hey, this is what I recommend. Go out there, check it out.
Yeah, for sure. I I always say that, I want to get into more fiction and in the future, but there are so many like real life things that I want to consume that it's hard for me to even get beyond the books or the podcasts that are going to teach me something. And so I'm still stuck in that world. I would recommend the Lenny Rachitsky podcast. He is one of the like he's built an amazing community, and I started listening to his podcast a couple years ago because he's a product manager. A lot of the early guests also were product managers, so it was more about like learning about the function. But then it slowly evolved into inviting people from growth, people from sales, people like VPs, then even learning or helping people understand how Airbnb or Uber or whatever other company in the valley or even beyond the valley are building teams and management. So it actually became helpful also on this like talent side of things. And so I think his guests are phenomenal. There's like everything. Even now, investors have also joined as guests. So if you want to like that, to me has been the place where I can hear not just him, and he's a great person. Like he like summarizes the knowledge really well and knows what questions to ask. But it's like just getting an amplification of like lots of brains and knowledge into me. So that's been fun to watch and follow. And then I would say my favorite podcast, um, you know, uh, by Miles is it's called the Internet History Podcast. I don't know if you ever come across that one. It's called the Internet History Podcast. And I remember when I moved to California in 2017, um, it just feels that place in the world feels special. Like you land you're in Silicon Valley, you're seeing all these companies and these logos, and one of the things that I realized was that I didn't, I understood technology superficially, but I wanted really to learn the foundation of it. And so this is a great podcast and I would recommend to anybody working in tech. I think today we take for granted that you and I here are sitting through a call in remote locations, and we think this is just like normal and the way it is. Obviously, it wasn't this way, always this way, right? It took a lot of investment, a lot of scientists, a lot of smart people to really want to break the mold and really make things happen. So it's a historical walkthrough of like the beginnings of like it started with Mark Andreessen and some of the people that were working with him in Illinois and like building the Mosaic browser, and then it takes takes you through like the rest of the history basically all the way to I think it stops in like 2006 or seven in the launch of the iPad. So it's like roughly like 15 years of like how the internet as we know it today got started. So I just find it fascinating.
No, thanks for that. I'll check it out and I'll just make sure hope my audience really appreciate that. So before we go, like I said, get lots of people just keep talking to me all the time, asking me questions about entrepreneurship and um, basically, how they build it, all these things. Some of the questions I asked you earlier. Leave us with a pointer or two. Just leave them with a pointer or two, or just like, okay, here's a do's and don't, or here's how this work, or this is bad, don't even do it. Just leave us, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and you and I think talked about learning earlier in your career. Definitely index on learning. Don't index on potential fame or followers or something that ego driven things like my friend. I want my friends to know this or that. Really index for learning. Most of the times that means working for someone really smart, whether it's a good manager at a larger setting or whether it's a founder. In some cases, that actually means you going out to the world and finding that knowledge and that content. But really, what you want to do is learn, and it's important to learn, the good things, but also learn the things that you don't want to do. As you go through your journey and you meet different people and different angles and ways of doing things, you also start building your own conviction of how do you want to do things and how you don't want to do things. It's equally important to find those moments where like you find the negatives. So yeah, I would say early in your career is index on learning. It's the biggest I would say equalizer and the biggest leverage you have. You have so many resources right now online. There's no reason why people cannot consume what they need to be able to be successful and launch their own things as entrepreneurs. And then the second thing would be the building community aspect that we talked about as well. Building a community. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, there are so many places where you can go. Not just books anymore. Communities. Some of these are free. Some of these are paid. But get in front of people. You want to be able to be. And there's a famous saying, and I don't know who's attributed to, but that each individual is the average of the five closest people next to them, right? Like the five closest individuals in your life. So think about that. Who are your closest people today? Are these people that are they helping you, get forward and getting to where you want to be? And if the answer is no, then maybe you think about a community as that place where you can find and be surrounded by people who have your same ambitions and want to do great things.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed this. I think this was pretty powerful. To my audience, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any, just subscribe and leave me a comment. Or if you would like to get more information from Pablo, I just check out my YouTube channel. I will basically show you how to reach him and connect with him. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Glenn. This is fun. Talk to you soon.